Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming to today's webinar, the Dementia Friendly Library, Increasing Belonging in Virginia Libraries. My name is Tiffany Chavis, and I'm the Outreach and Education Librarian for Region 1 of the NNLM, located at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I will be your moderator for today's session. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off to avoid any complications with bandwidth and such. So before we get started, I first wanted to take care of some housekeeping items. First, as you may have noticed already, we are recording today's session. It may take up to 30 days to edit and caption a video, but we will be sure to send out the link to the recording when it is available. I wanted to make sure you all are aware that you're all on mute. This is to cut down on background noise. If you're unable to hear, you may have seen the slides I was going back and forth with before. It was in reference to audio. So select the small up arrow next to the audio controls to adjust settings. Select your audio source or select test speaker and microphone. Respond to the questions that pop up, and Zoom should be able to guide you through selecting the appropriate speaker. Captions are turned on. Someone had already mentioned that in the chat. So you can go ahead and select the captions button, either to hide or to actually show them. In the meetings control bar, click on the captions icon. You may see that instead of having to go into the menu. You'll see it in a gray box with the letter CC. Also, a link to the evaluation to get your M.L.I.S will be provided in the chat. Note that the M.Ed Ed will, their site is currently being updated starting tomorrow. So starting tomorrow through July 8th, the site will be offline. So if you are anxious to get that CE, make sure you do it today. If you feel like waiting, you're welcome to do so. Just make sure to do it after July 8th when the site is back up and running. So many of you may be familiar with the NNLM, while others may not. So first, let me start off by telling you a little bit about who we are. So the NNLM, or the Network for the National Library of Medicine, is funded by, you probably guessed it, the National Library of Medicine. Now, the NLM is the world's largest biomedical library, which produces information resources such as PubMed, clinicaltrials.gov, and Medline+. The NNLM is the outreach arm of the NLM, or the National Library of Medicine. The NLM is a part of the National Institutes of Health, which is the nation's leading research agency. Excuse me. So the NNLM has what we call ROCs, or regions, offices, and centers, and it's made up of 7 regional medical libraries, 4 national information centers, and 3 national offices. NNLM's mission is to advocate, or is to advance the progress of medicine and improve public health by providing all U.S. health professionals with equal access to biomedical information and improving the public's access to information to enable them to be able to make informed decisions about their health. Now, the NNLM provides free webinars and classes to librarians, health professionals, and the general public, access to a network of public and academic libraries, community and faith-based organizations, and universities. And also, we provide funding for health outreach projects. While I am located in Region 1, based out of the University of Maryland, Baltimore's Health Sciences and Human Services Library, feel free to learn more about the NNLM and find your own region You probably guessed it, this one too, which is nnlm.gov. That is our website. So let's dig in here. For today's agenda, we will discuss dementia statistics and data, describe the Dementia Friendly Library initiative, and discuss programmatic measures and lessons learned. Now, let me take the time to introduce you all to our speaker. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker for today's webinar, Nan Carmack. She is the Director of Library Development and Networking for the State Library of Virginia, working with all the public libraries in the state. Nan lives in Richmond with her husband and 3 dogs. She believes that libraries are the intersection between intellectual curiosity and social justice. She also hosts an annual inclusion challenge for Virginia libraries annually. Well, library workers, let's say. Current data and her lived experience in caring for her father with dementia was the impetus for this challenge. So help me all to welcome Nan, and thank you for being here with us today, Nan.
It is my pleasure. I appreciate your interest. And I am going to share my screen. Well, it's not got the screen that I'm looking for, so sorry about that. We will hope that those dogs you mentioned behave themselves, because you know they often don't during these events. So I welcome you all, and let's get to the slides. Of course, all the buttons just really cover up the things you need, don't they?
They really do. You can move the whole bar though.
Yes. Okay, here we are. As Tiffany mentioned, I have some lived experience with dementia, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But it did inspire this idea of how do we make dementia a more understandable condition, and how do we support our patrons and their care partners in the library who have dementia. And so all of the data I'm about to share, I will kind of, most of it is Virginia based, but we are going to, I'm going to encourage you to look at your own census data, find your own state partners, and we'll talk about who they might be. But really, why are we talking about dementia? So let's look at the data. This is from the census data. And you can see that we used to have this lovely kind of pyramidal structure in our population. But you can see now that we no longer have as many children, and we look very columnar now instead of pyramidal. And you can see that this age range of 60 to 64, where this big green arrow is pointing, this is normally where the pyramid began to shrink at top, but you can see that that's no longer happening. So, and up here by 2060, they're suggesting that many of us will be living beyond the age of 85. So our aging population is certainly something libraries need to be considering. Certainly story times have been our bread and butter for the dawn of time, but we may need to be shifting that to paying more attention to our aging population. More national data, that percentage population of children under 18 is shrinking, and the over 65 is growing. And that's by 2034, older adults are projected to outnumber our children. And you can see that the bottom graph shows actual data over to speculated data, confirming and affirming that prevalence of older adults. And worldwide, you can see that by 2050, they're expecting 135 million worldwide cases of dementia as compared to our smaller growth over at 2015, and 2030 is probably a better, a closer estimate to us than 2015 was. So in 6 short years, we'll be at 76,000 cases of dementia, and then seeing that doubled over the next 20 years. So it's on the rise. And certainly there's that correlation between our aging population and cases of dementia, because it does seem to be an age-related disease. Here is some Virginia data. Subjective cognitive decline is precursors to dementia, also called mild cognitive impairment. And you can see here the behavioral risk factor surveillance for people age 45 and older, where 1 in 11 people 45 and older are experiencing some subjective cognitive decline. I'm 56 years old. I can guarantee you I'm experiencing subjective cognitive decline. I find myself having to write notes to myself for far more often, using my phone as a memory device, etc. 34% of these people will have to give up their day-to-day activities, such as driving a car. And less than half of us have discussed these symptoms with a healthcare provider. I have discussed mine with a healthcare provider, and she says it's perfectly normal for a person my age. And then nearly a third of people with SCD say it's interfered with their social activities, work, or volunteering. I think the little bit of that slide got caught off on my screen, but you can see, I hope you can see that 32% of those people need some assistance with taking care of their personal business, you know, in those activities that require us to be using our cognitive function to manage life. So with all of that data and my own lived experience of taking care of my dad, who died during COVID, not of COVID, in 2021, I ended up moving back in with my parents in the middle of 2020, because it was clear that they were not, mom, who does not have dementia, she'll be 95 in a month, and is doing beautifully well, but she couldn't manage dad on her own. So I moved in, and I was fortunate because dad remained his humorous, gentlemanly, and kind self during his battle with dementia. That's not true for everyone. So it was a very difficult time. We couldn't get support because of COVID. So it was really just the two of us and dad, and it was a struggle. And I thought, gosh, there's got to be a way that we can do better about educating folks with who don't have dementia or don't have dementia experience in helping those who do and their care partners. I learned this term care partner, not caregiver, from a woman you're about to meet, Pat Sullivan, and her husband, Tim. So Pat and I happened upon each other really serendipitously. You can see she's wearing a William and Mary t-shirt, and she had posted something on the, I'm a William and Mary alum as well, and she had posted something on our William and Mary's version of Facebook about dementia advocacy. And I was thinking these things at the same time. And so I just called her up and said, hey, I saw your post. I'm a librarian. How can we collaborate? And she was so excited. Her husband has had dementia for quite some time, and she offered these pictures as sort of a demonstration of the evolution. He was newly diagnosed in this picture, and you can see still healthy and well and smiling, and they're having a good time. And you can see that this is probably about 10 years later. I think they were in their mid 50s or early 50s at Tim's original diagnosis. And here he is probably in his 60s. And now you can see today with them in their 70s. So Pat was a real critical voice for me. She had done so much research on her own and shared her experience. And that really resulted in a lot of best practices for us to offer to public librarians. When we were doing this presentation live for Virginia's library workers, this is where Pat took over, and she presented some of the myths about dementia and mild cognitive impairment, MCI, and you'll see that acronym throughout. That memory loss doesn't mean dementia, which doesn't mean Alzheimer's. There are so many vast and varied associated illnesses. We're learning, aren't we, about the spectrum of a wide variety of neurological things, and mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's is one of those spectra. So memory loss doesn't mean that you have dementia. It doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's. It means there could be some mix of things. The next myth is that only older people get dementia. We don't consider 45-year-olds old, right? And yet we're seeing that uptick in that 34% of population having some dementia. The next myth, my dad was a really great example of that. He did not get agitated, violent, or aggressive. He was his lovely self throughout. And the fourth myth is that people can't enjoy new activities, learn new things, or have a good quality of life. As we move forward, I'll share a lot of things that we can recommend for people with dementia to keep activity and enjoyment and a fullness of life that people think folks with dementia can't have. So the next myth is that nothing could be done for dementia. There are huge strides being made. And myth 6, only trained medical professionals can help with folks with dementia. It's just not so anymore. As the research comes back, there are lots of ways that non-medical folks are supporting and helping people with dementia. And these are things that Pat really want you today to know, that living today is as important as the cure. They want to focus on the present moment and what's happening right now. And wouldn't that still be a lovely way for all of us to live? And that doesn't end if a person has dementia. Certainly the media focuses on a cure, but the person with dementia and their care partner are living day to day. And so what does that mean? That means treating people with dementia as worthy people who, like you, have unique joys and concerns for autonomy and meaning. They have dreams. It's important for them to have a sense of purpose, and they can be afraid. They are still just regular human beings. A care partner is someone who is taking care of that person, living with that person. It could be a family member. It could be, a caregiver in a group home environment. But really, that care partner is as involved and important as the person with dementia themselves. It can be very difficult, but it can also be very rewarding. And there's no hard and fast rules or easy, quick ways to be a friend, but to avoid judging the caregiver and yourself is a really great start. When I was taking care of Dad, I would have to pause when my frustration would get high because we'd had the same conversation 3 times in 30 minutes to really exhale and just say, you know what? If I didn't remember what was said, I would want someone to help me. And really doing that person first, living in the moment and excluding that judgment of myself because I know it was frustrating. So taking away the judgment for that care partner and for yourself as a human, if you're struggling with someone who's in your library, that's okay. Just remember, you're all humans, and that's the best strategy for coping. A lot of the trends that we're seeing are person-centered care. And that goes back to what I was just saying about this is a human who has special needs, wants, interests, skills, and talents. And the idea here is for each person to experiment to see what helps. In the image you see there, art and aging, there is a lot of evidence base now that allows the creative field to support people with dementia. I am a creative person. I'm a painter and a potter, and I'm a knitter. And when I'm doing those activities, I can be right there in the moment. It almost requires that it be there in the moment. And even if that's just coloring with a person with dementia, or finger paints, or talking about music. My dad was a professional musician. So we would, when he would get agitated, I just turn on the stereo and we would listen to classical music. And then he would start talking about that music and what it meant to him and reminisce about times he'd performed that particular piece. He would then go sit at the piano, and you think, gosh, how can you play the piano with dementia? So much of it for him was muscle memory, that he was able to just improvise, and his fingers would take over. And that brought so much joy into his life and my mom's. Mom's also a professional musician, so she would sing along, and we would have the most joyful moments based on his skills and his interest, having turned away from his agitation and frustration about not remembering what was happening that day or even who we were. It was just a good time. The other emphasis I want to place here is this idea of improv. And I know we all enjoy watching that show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? This is a really great strategy for helping people with dementia. If they're in your library and they perhaps think that they are somewhere else or that this is a different situation. When Dad was in the hospital, he used to think he was in a museum. And so we would play kind of improv. Oh, well, what do you think this is? And, look at the IV bag, and we would make up what it was and what that exhibit was trying to tell people and the lighting. And so we would just go wherever he was. And so with that idea of improv on the part of the care partners is a really powerful idea. And you can think about in the library as well, in that setting. Where do they think they are? What year do they think it is? And just go with them. Research shows that reorienting them and trying to say, oh, well, this is, Tuesday, June 25th in the year 2024. Joe Biden is the president and it's really hot outside. That makes no difference to the individual with dementia. They don't care. It just agitates them more. So to go wherever they are and listen to what they have to say and ask them questions. Oh, you're at university. Tell me about your experience in university, and just let them go. So this idea of improv is really important. And certainly recognizing that people with any kind of cognitive impairment are individuals, and what works for one person isn't going to work for another person. And so really letting go of expectations and letting the person with dementia take the lead. Most folks with dementia, are, by the time they really are unaware of where they are, they have been leading up to this and they know it. And so you may have somebody that you encounter with dementia that might stop and go, oh, wait, I think I already told you that. Or they might cover by saying, oh, right, and let me get back on track, right? So just being aware of the place that person might be. There's also been a surge in combinations of types of dementia and mild cognitive impairment. I am not a medical professional, and I will leave this up to your excellent librarian skills to go do some research on the different kinds of combinations of dementia with other impairments or other illnesses, because I don't want to talk about something I don't know about. Dad's dementia was paired with congestive heart failure. And so there was a lot of other physical symptoms with his dementia that were difficult to care for. He had a catheter and he didn't understand what that was. And so we had the daily conversation of, well, no, you don't need to go to the bathroom, you have a catheter. Well, what is this sticking out of me? And we would go through that multiple times a day. But the real trend of people with dementia are leading the charge and the discussion about dementia. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute. So let's talk about some resource tools. I made Pat pick 5 of different kinds of things, and certainly the list is far greater than 5. So One of her favorites is this Dementia Action Collaborative from Washington State. And this was a handout that they created to talk to children about dementia and busting the stigma around people with dementia, and that those folks still have gifts. That we think about the personhood first. I'm still here, I'm a person, and deserve respect and kindness just like everybody else. And we still have the capacity to cherish and love our families. You'll hear often stories about people who have advanced dementia and don't recognize people, but there's also a lot of research showing that they still have feelings like when you walk in the room, they may not know who you are, but they know in their heart, oh, this is someone I love, right? So this is a really important thing to remember. There's still the feelings there, even if they may not have the cognitive ability to say, oh, that's Nan, that's my daughter, right? Every day, Dad would come into my bedroom and say, hey, who's that person in the kitchen? And I'd say, that's your wife, her name is Liz. And I would hear him walk to the kitchen and he would go, hey, who's that woman in the bedroom? And Mom would go, that's your daughter, her name is Nan. And we did this every day, several times a day. And it got to be funny after a while, because we recognized that he still loved us and cherished our ability to get together, even if he wasn't entirely sure who we were. And he still had a lot to give us. As I mentioned, the music, the humor, the ability to do certain things in the midst of his illnesses. He still fixed the screen door. He built a ramp for my mother who has some mobility issues to not have to step down. He still had so much he could do, but only if we let him, right? He would say, well, I need some hammer and nails. In another setting, who in their right mind would give someone with Alzheimer's a hammer and nails? Well, I knew what he was capable of with those hammer and nails. He was an engineer professionally. And sure enough, he could do those things. It comes from somewhere else in his brain. But thinking about how we were going to live, we had to recognize that it was hard and that we'll get through it. And that person can have fun, can have friends and family that brings them joy. And again, I mentioned this was during COVID. And so my nieces and nephews would come by as they were in town, my brother and his wife, various friends. We started having what we called garage parties, where we would just get out the folding chairs and sit in the garage 6 feet apart. And Dad would always introduce himself, and his friends were at first a little startled, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm Donald, we work together at blah. And then once he had a little glimpse of what that was, he could reminisce, and that was lovely. So being able to find opportunities to have joy and to still have fun and to have friends and family around you is really an important part of busting the stigma of dementia. Here's some of the top 5 online resources. Glorious Opportunity is created by a physician who has dementia. And I will encourage you to visit that site. I am going to give you a link that has all of these resources in it. The Dementia Action Alliance is really interesting because it is created by caregivers and people with dementia. So it's a support network and able to ask folks for advice and share experiences. Aging Care is a for-profit business, but they have sort of a Facebook group or a chat room that does a similar thing to Dementia Action Alliance. Reimagining Dementia is a resource for those creative outlets that I discussed, like the art and the music and the movement. Hilarity for Charity is created, I've forgotten the comedian's name, but it's someone's name you would recognize, who created this opportunity to raise funds for his wife's mother who had dementia, but also on their website has tremendous amount of resources. So those are your top 5 online resources. There's so many more, but I made Pat pick 5. And she says, these are the top 5 books to have. In your library, it would be amazing if you could create a robust dementia collection. That would be fun. And when we get to the Dementia Friendly Challenge, I'll show you how we encouraged libraries to do that. Here are her top 5 books to have. And you'll notice that there are a couple that are directly about dementia, but you'll see Joey Selden's book there on the right, Emotions, an Owner's Manual. And it's as critical for you to be able to recognize your own emotions as well as those of the people around you. And that Pat, my experience was really an 8-month period. Pat's experience is 20 years long now. And she said she really had to learn how to recognize what she herself was going through so that she could help her husband. So those are your top 5 books. The top 5 articles to read. This first one, Melanie Bishop is a physician, and somewhere in California, I saw someone who was from California, has a virtual reality program that allows you to experience what having dementia is like. And this organization will travel. You can also go to them so that you can have that experience to learn authentically what it might be like to have dementia. The Busting Dementia Stigma, One Children's Book at a Time is the slide that we looked at a few times ago. Denise Hawkins directly addresses Black families in her book. It's different culture, different challenges. And so it's really important that Denise's work is there to represent, certainly in her context, the faith community really rallied around them. And that was lovely to read about. Mariah Carrillo, Lifestyle and its Potential to Preserve Cognitive Function and Reduce the Risk of Dementia. It's a really important read for all of us to be able to take care of our brain health and preserve what cognitive function we currently have and reduce risks for getting worse. And then this idea by Jason Resendez, caregiving is a sacred bond, and our policies are starting to reflect it. We've seen this some in the life insurance and the who is the authorized caregiver, who's medical proxy, who's available to be a medical proxy. Those policies are starting to become more open. It used to only be a spouse or a child or a parent. That's becoming broader. So I encourage you to read these articles as you have the ability and start learning some more about dementia and these particular aspects of it. So how might a library do better to serve folks with dementia? Collections. For patrons with dementia, it often comes with some reading impairment, some visual impairment. And again, these are aging folks, so they might have vision issues anyway. So that large print collection and that audiobook collection is really important. Short stories and poetry. These are great ways to continue to engage someone with cognitive impairment in literature. They don't have to remember a very long plot. They can just enjoy that, the word and rhythm of poetry. Picture books. I know you guys all know those great big DK visual encyclopedias of whatever the topic it is, marine mammals, karate. Those are fun and wonderful books to look at with someone with dementia because they can look at the picture and remember things about their own life that that picture is sparking. There are some resource books in the bibliography I'll be providing for the care partners, as well as the patrons with dementia, including those 5 we just talked about. Having nonfiction and fiction with dementia as a theme line goes along the same roles. We know of Dr. Ruding Bishop Sims' famous quote of books should be a mirror, a window, and a sliding glass door. We typically think about that in racial and gender identity diversity, but we really need to think about that with dementia as well. How many fictional books are out there with a character with dementia? I can think of two. Okay. So that representation matters as well. And then having personal care titles and resources for allies, friends, etc., is really important so that they can take care of themselves while they're care partnering with the person with dementia. Caregiver kits, we're going to look a little more closely at what a caregiver kit is. So we'll skip on that just for a moment. Oh, so here it is on the very next slide. So a caregiver kit, this is a MARC record, or I'm sorry, a catalog screenshot from the Henrico Public Library here in Virginia. And in their caregiver kits, you can see they all have a theme. There's generally some sort of media in there, whether that's a DVD or an iPod loaded with some music. There are probably books in there. I checked out one for my dad that was about cars, because he was kind of a motorhead and really enjoyed fixing cars and old cars. And we sat there and looked through the books, and he would talk about, oh, I had this when I was however old he was. And we talked about that car and what it meant to him. And, oh, you know, my dad had this car and it was terrible and it kept breaking down, and all of these kinds of things. We were able to have discussions that otherwise, you know, you go to visit someone and you're like, okay, I don't know what to talk about. Well, these caregiver kits allow you to have something to talk about. Some of the kits might have photo cards with images and even suggested questions about the past. And these are all designed to spark conversations. And these are just three of the themes they have: pets, holidays, food and cooking, and they all had different things. This cooking kit actually had something really interesting in it. They had some scratch and sniff. I'm not entirely sure where they got them, but they had some scratch and sniff cards that had like the smell of vanilla, the smell of lemons, and you could smell them. And certainly we all know that smelling is a wonderful scent, is a wonderful spark to our brains to remember things, right? So caregiver kits are another way we can serve in our libraries. This is really great for younger generations and for people who may have no clue how to communicate with their loved one who has dementia. This takes the pressure off and gives them a topic and some ideas of how to communicate. There are memory cafes and care partner support groups. They often are the same thing. They're just a social gathering that allows people experiencing memory loss and their care partner to socialize and build new support networks. They're free. And as you can see in this picture, you know, they're just playing a game. They're playing Jenga and chatting. It doesn't even have to be surrounding by anything else. You could just have some coloring pages out, some plain paper, anything for people to engage their hands while they just chat. It's a lovely opportunity for the caregivers as well to connect with each other. And it gets everybody out of the house and preventing that isolation that often occurs. In Virginia, we have a number of really great organizations that are working on dementia. Our Virginia Department of Aging has created the Virginia Dementia Roadmap. Sorry, there's a fly in my face. Likely your state Department of Aging also has this. Area Agencies on Aging, great resource. They are very heavily involved in caregiver cafes, or excuse me, the memory cafes in Virginia. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has a resource guide. Certainly, and you all, I think, probably have senior navigators too. I think that's a federal program. This link is to ours in Virginia, and that can be a great source to call them up and say, here's where I live, here are the needs we have, where do I go for help? And they send you in the correct direction. In Northern Virginia, which is the DC area, it's all the suburbs of Washington, DC, they have gone farther and have a dementia support program that really takes it further. They host lots of educational seminars for the care partners, social activities, and creative activities for the folks with dementia. So again, there are probably lots of these kinds of organizations in your state as well. So we identified the resources today with the library staff. We then published it on LVA's Niche Academy, which is our learning management software. I'm going to show you that in a minute. And we had folks research their own collections and do their own research. And at the end of that, so we had this webinar, and prior to that, we had a launch at our State Library Association to talk about dementia, and Pat zoomed in, and we were able to have a great chat. So that all primed the pump for the Dementia Friendly Library Challenge. And we had 92 people complete. As of yesterday, 153 people had registered and partially completed. We do say, hey, you have a month to do this, but it really is evergreen until we run out of the swag that they get at the end, which is a purple ribbons lapel pen and a purple ribbon sticker that says this library is dementia friendly. And so they can put that on their gear. They can wear it on their shirt. Most folks know that the purple ribbon means a variety of things, but it also means Alzheimer's support. So here's how you might replicate this. Find your community partners. This is really important. Find your patrons. Your library workers probably know who's dealing with this, because this is how we engage our patrons across the desk, right? What's going on? They might have seen this. And it's really important to have that voice of experience, the lived experience, as you engage in this work. There's that saying of not about us, without us. And it's really important to get their voice involved in what is it that they really need from you as the library to plan your interventions. Because if I don't have dementia and I don't have a firsthand experience, I might think, oh, well, I'm going to just go do this and it'll stick. Well, without that first person voice of experience, we may not be responding to their actual needs. We spent $600, $100 for the swag I discussed earlier, and then we paid Pat a $500 speaker fee. We created a LibGuide from our Virginia resources and sent that out in editable form to our local libraries so they could add their specific local resources to that. And then the whole challenge was hosted again in Niche Academy. We are getting ready to put that in the Niche Academy marketplace. So if you are a marketplace user, you should be able to find it for free and put it into your Niche Academy. Again, it is staff oriented, not public oriented. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and then show you what the Niche Academy Challenge looked like. Here we go. So you can see the Library of Virginia Academy, My Niche Academy, that's the URL for it. And so it starts off just as I did with you, the why. Why are we even talking about this? And then a brief overview of what they would be learning, right? And it totaled 8 to 10, not of, and then what the swag is. So you can see the overview of the modules, the lived experience, what is dementia and how prevalent is it? What's it like to have dementia? Trends in living with dementia, and what can libraries do? But I'm going to pop some of these open so you can see. And here's that live webinar that Pat and I recorded in January. And that was the very first thing that they looked at to get that lived experience. So we had some videos. for them to watch about what is it. And then the resource found in the CDC's website. So we learned about what is it. And then we looked at some of that data that I engaged you all with at the beginning to talk about who is affected by it. And then again, the myths. I beg your pardon. And then we also had some different articles for folks to read in an estimated time. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted you to see how the Niche Academy modules were set up. And these again were some videos. So that's just an overview of the Dementia Friendly Library Challenge pathway and how you might engage the folks that you work with or in your state in learning about dementia friendly library challenges. One of the activities that folks had to do was to go search their catalog and make a list of what they had and see sort of where they fell, and also then do a suggested purchase list based on the resources they gathered. So every activity that they had to complete, I could see from the back end of Niche. I didn't grade people things, but I just wanted to make sure that they'd actually done them. And I think that was a really important piece, that people were actively going and doing the activities, because it opened up their eyes about, you know, the fact that maybe we aren't representing folks with dementia, maybe we are dismissing caregivers and their needs, etc. So that's all the information I wanted to share, and I'm certainly open to questions. I'm looking in the chat. No saints around here. Oh, that is a good one. Yes, Rachel, I'll be delighted for the slides to be sent out by Tiffany. And yeah, because there are all those hot links in the slides, which is very helpful.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we are able to share the slides. Do you
put a link?
have...
I'll put yeah, it's a Google Doc. Let me just put it right in there.
Okay, yeah, just because when we share slides, they have to be accessible 508, and
They have to be what?
that is a conversation. 508 accessible. That's not a conversation me and Faith had, but by all means, feel free to put it in the
Okay.
chat.
Well, there's the Google link to that slideshow, and it is set to be open to anybody with the link. So.
Yeah, does anyone else have any questions for Nan? We have a thank you in here, a couple thank yous. Folks have some personal experience, personally and professionally.
Yeah, I'll drop that link in the,
anything else coming.
there's a request for the Niche Academy link. So let me.
Okay, so we have a comment, great information. Can you tell us again where to find the Niche Academy resource?
Yep, I just dropped that in chat. You won't be able to get into it because it's, you know, for Virginia only. But if you have Niche Academy at your library, Rachel, you're in North Carolina. I'm 90% certain you guys have Niche Academy. So as soon as it gets put in Marketplace, you should be able to go to Marketplace and search for Dementia Friendly Library Pathway and download it to your own Niche Academy. But it might take a few days to get that done, because I don't know how it works, and I'll have to get somebody else to do it. Yeah, Rondi, Washington State. Many of your state libraries do offer Niche Academy. Yeah, Cynthia, great, Georgia. So if you don't have it, get directly in touch with me and I can send you sort of a PDF that outlines all the things that are in it. But I don't know how you would serve it. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have a learning management system, I don't know how you would push it out, but I would be happy to share that. Denise, I'm sorry to hear your father's been diagnosed, but it can be as much a joyful time as you let it be. And the reason folks with dementia get agitated and angry is because they don't have a way to express themselves that makes sense to them. And that's the source of that. So if you can meet his agitation and frustration with something that he loves, like in my case, music and my dad, you know, what is it that he can do? Can he take a walk? Can he, you know, does he enjoy, I don't know, whatever it is that he enjoys? Find a way to engage him in that, even if he can't do the thing himself. Of course.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I will then move on to the final slide, which again has some information for evaluation. And I'm going to put that link in the chat again. Okay. Another thank you, very informative and supportive presentation.
And obviously, you guys, there's, you know, nothing we can do in 45 minutes except to give you a fingernail's worth of a place to start. And I hope that you will take that place to start and start.